Every night, she left food at the forest's edge. And every morning, it was gone. Lyra Fenwick never asked where the pups came from. Only that they were starving. Only that no one else would help them. They came in 2s and 3s, small, thin, eyes too old for their age. Rejected by the pack. Forgotten by the laws meant to protect them. Feeding them was forbidden. Punishable. Sometimes fatal. But Lyra fed them anyway. She never noticed the tracks that circled her steps. Never saw the tall shadow watching from between the trees. Never realized that every kindness she offered was being measured by a king. Because the pups she saved did not belong to the wild. They carried alpha blood. And somewhere beyond the forest, Orion Nightvale, the Alpha King himself, was watching the woman who had unknowingly found his greatest secret. She thought she was saving forgotten children. She had no idea she was feeding the future of the pack. Before the story continues, let me know in the comment where you are listening from and what time it is for you. Your support proves I'm not wasting my time creating stories. If you enjoy emotional werewolf romance stories filled with kindness, fate, and powerful alpha bonds, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who loves dark fantasy stories. The bread was 3 days old, but Lyra wrapped it carefully anyway. She moved through her cottage in silence, gathering what little she could spare. A cloth bundle of dried meat, half a wheel of cheese gone hard at the edges, turnips still caked with dirt from the morning's harvest. Not much. Never enough. But it was all she had. Outside, the wind carried the scent of pine and approaching winter. The village lay quiet behind her, windows shuttered against the cold. No one stirred this late. No one watched. That was the only reason she dared. Lyra pulled her cloak tight and slipped into the trees. The forest path was familiar now, worn smooth by her own feet over countless nights. She knew which roots would catch her stride, which branches hung low enough to snag her hair. The moon filtered through bare limbs overhead, painting silver across the frozen ground. She walked until the village lights disappeared. Until the only sound was her breath and the distant cry of an owl. Then she stopped. The clearing was small, ringed by ancient oaks whose roots twisted above the earth like gnarled fingers. In the center sat a flat stone, broad and smooth. Lyra knelt beside it and began to unpack her bundle. Bread on the left. Meat in the middle. Cheese and turnips scattered around the edges. A feast for the forgotten. She sat back on her heels and waited. The first one always came from the east. A girl, no more than 6 winters old, with matted hair the color of smoke and eyes that gleamed amber in the dark. She crept forward on silent feet, shoulders hunched, ready to bolt at the slightest sound. Lyra didn't move. Didn't smile. The child had learned long ago that kindness could be a trap. The girl snatched the bread and retreated 3 paces before tearing into it with desperate hunger. Then came the others. A boy with a crooked arm that had healed poorly. Twin girls who clung to each other like shadows. An older child barely 10, who watched the tree line with the wariness of a seasoned scout. Rejected. All of them. Too weak. Too strange. Too much trouble for a pack that valued strength above all else. The laws were clear. A pup who could not keep pace would be left behind. A child who showed defiance would be cast out. Bloodlines that threatened the old order would be erased. And anyone who aided them would share their fate. Lyra knew the risk. She fed them anyway. They ate in silence, each one careful not to take more than their share. They had learned discipline in a way no pack training could teach. Hunger was a cruel instructor. When the food was gone, the oldest child met her gaze. A boy with dark hair and eyes too sharp for his age. Lightbringer, he whispered. It was the only name they had for her. Lyra nodded once, then rose to her feet. She never stayed long. Never spoke unless necessary. The less they knew of her, the safer they all were. But as she turned to leave, something made her pause. A sound. Barely more than a breath. She looked back toward the trees, toward the deep shadows that gathered between the trunks. For a moment, she could have sworn she saw movement. A shape too tall to be a child. Too still to be a deer. Watching. Her heart quickened. Then the wind shifted, and the shadow was gone. Lyra pulled her cloak tighter and hurried back toward the village, unaware that the forest had just made a decision. The Watcher would let her live. For now. Lyra returned the next night with bandages hidden beneath the bread. She had noticed the boy's limp. The way the smallest girl favored her left side. These children were surviving, but barely. Hunger she could ease. Wounds left untended would kill them just as surely as the cold. They came as they always did, silent, cautious, eyes reflecting moonlight like polished coins. But tonight, Lyra didn't leave after setting down the food. She sat. The oldest boy froze mid-step, his hand hovering over the dried meat. The others drew back, uncertain. They had never seen her stay before. "I mean no harm," Lyra said softly. "I brought something else." She pulled the bandages from her cloak, along with a small jar of salve her mother had taught her to make from pine resin and herbs. The boy with the crooked arm stared at it as though it were made of gold. "May I?" she asked. He didn't answer. But slowly, carefully, he extended his arm. The break had been set wrong, the bone fused at an awkward angle. There was nothing she could do for that now. But the raw scrapes along his elbow told a different story. He'd been fighting. Or running. Probably both. Lyra cleaned the wounds with steady hands, spreading the salve with gentle pressure. The boy never flinched. Never made a sound. "What's your name?" she asked. "Kale," he whispered. One by one, the others crept closer. The smallest girl, no more than 4, had a gash across her shoulder, half-healed and angry. Lyra wrapped it carefully, murmuring soothing words she barely remembered from childhood. Words her own mother had used when Lyra had fallen from trees or scraped her knees on river stones. The twin girls came next, sharing a single bruise that stretched across both their backs. As if they'd been struck together. Lyra's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. The smoke-haired girl with amber eyes watched from a distance, refusing to come closer. Lyra didn't push. When she finished, Kale studied her with an intensity that made her uneasy. "You shouldn't help us," he said. "Why not?" "Because they'll punish you." His voice was matter-of-fact. Not afraid. Just certain. The pack doesn't forgive mercy. Lyra met his gaze. "Then I suppose we're both breaking their laws." Something flickered in his expression. Not quite a smile. But close. "Why were you cast out?" she asked quietly. Kale glanced at the others. Different reasons. Some were too small. Too slow. Too much trouble. He touched his crooked arm. "I asked too many questions." "And her?" Lyra nodded toward the amber-eyed girl. "Mira doesn't speak. The elders said she was touched by madness." Kale's voice hardened. "She's not mad. She just doesn't waste words on people who've already decided what she is." Lyra looked at the children gathered around her, bruised, scarred, half-starved. But their eyes held something she hadn't expected. Strength. Not the brutal kind the pack valued. Something quieter. Deeper. The kind that came from enduring what should have broken them. "You're not weak," Lyra said suddenly. Kale tilted his head. "The pack thinks we are. The pack is wrong." The words hung in the cold air. Then something strange happened. The smallest girl stepped forward and pressed her forehead against Lyra's knee. Not a bow. Something else. Something instinctive. One by one, the others did the same. Even Mira, who had kept her distance all night, moved closer. She didn't touch Lyra. But she lowered her head, just slightly, in a gesture that looked almost like reverence. Lyra's breath caught. She didn't understand what she was seeing. Didn't know that the gesture was one reserved for pack leaders. For alphas. She only knew that these children trusted her. And that terrified her more than the risk of discovery ever had. When she finally stood to leave, Kale caught her sleeve. "Lightbringer," he said. "Thank you." Lyra nodded, unable to speak past the tightness in her throat. She walked back through the forest, unaware that the shadow between the trees had drawn closer tonight. Unaware that the Alpha King had just watched his own children bow to a stranger. And that he had not stopped them. Orion Nightvale had killed men for less than what this woman was doing. He stood in the darkness between the oaks, perfectly still, watching her kneel beside children who should not exist. Children the law demanded he forget. Children who carried his blood. She didn't know he was there. Never had. For 3 full moons, he had tracked her movements, learned her patterns. The way she walked with her head down through the village, drawing no attention. The way she saved every scrap of food, no matter how meager. The way she slipped into the forest when the night was deepest. At first, he had intended to stop her. Feeding rejected pups was treason. The law was absolute. The pack's strength depended on it. Only the worthy survived, only the strong led. Compassion was a luxury that bred weakness. He had told himself that for years. But watching her now, bandaging a boy's crooked arm with hands gentler than any healer in his own keep, Orion felt something crack in the certainty he had built around himself. She worked in silence, her movements careful and precise. No wasted effort. No grand gestures. Just quiet, relentless kindness offered to children the world had thrown away. His children. Orion's jaw tightened. He hadn't known they still lived. The council had assured him the pups would be sent far from packlands, adopted into distant villages, given ordinary lives. He had believed them because believing was easier than acknowledging what he'd done. What he'd been forced to do. The prophecy had been clear. Children born of the Alpha King's blood outside the bonded line will bring war to the packs. The elders had demanded their removal. The council had voted. And Orion, newly crowned and desperate to hold a fracturing kingdom together, had agreed. He had condemned his own children to exile. And this woman, this fragile, foolish woman, had found them in the dark and fed them anyway. Lyra stood, brushing dirt from her skirts. The children watched her with expressions Orion recognized. Trust. Devotion. The kind of loyalty that couldn't be commanded. Only earned. Then the smallest girl did something that made Orion's breath catch. She pressed her forehead to Lyra's knee. One by one, the others followed. A submissive gesture. A recognition of authority. The same gesture his own warriors gave him when pledging their lives to his command. These pups, starved, broken, forgotten, were treating a village woman like an alpha. And she didn't even understand what she was receiving. Orion's instincts screamed at him to intervene. To step forward and reclaim what was his by blood and right. But something held him back. She would run if she saw him. Fear him. And these children, who had finally found someone worth trusting, would lose her. So he stayed in the shadows. Lyra gathered her things and turned toward the village path. For a moment, she paused, her head tilting as though sensing something amiss. Her gaze swept the tree line. Orion didn't move. Didn't breathe. Then she was gone, her footsteps fading into the night. The pups remained in the clearing, dividing the last of the food with careful fairness. The oldest boy, Kale, she had called him, looked directly at the place where Orion stood hidden. "I know you're there," the boy said quietly. Orion's eyes narrowed. "You've been watching for weeks." Kale's voice was calm, measured. Too calm for a child his age. "You never stop her. Never threaten us. So either you're waiting for something, or you're protecting her." Smart. Too smart. Orion stepped forward, just enough to let the moonlight catch his silhouette. The other pups scrambled back, eyes wide. But Kale held his ground, chin lifted in defiance. "Who are you?" the boy demanded. Orion could have lied. Should have lied. But looking at this child, his child, something in him refused. "Someone who made a terrible mistake," he said softly. Kale studied him with those two sharp eyes. "Are you going to hurt the Lightbringer?" "No." "Then why are you here?" Orion crouched, bringing himself to the boy's level. "To make sure no one else does." Understanding flickered across Kale's face. "You're from the pack." "Yes." "High rank." "Yes." Kale's jaw tightened. "Then you're the reason we're here." Orion held the child's gaze, unflinching. "Yes." For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Kale turned back to the others, gathering them close with a protectiveness that made Orion's chest ache. "If you're going to protect her," Kale said, "then do it right. The patrols are getting closer. They'll find her eventually. I know. And when they do? Orion straightened, his voice dropping into the command tone that had conquered kingdoms. They'll have to go through me first. Kale nodded once. Then he led the other children into the forest, disappearing like smoke. Orion stood alone in the clearing, staring at the empty stone where Lyra had laid her offerings. He had thought he was protecting his throne by sending these children away. Now he realized he had only been protecting himself from the choice he would eventually have to make. And watching this woman love what he had abandoned, Orion understood with perfect clarity. The choice was already made. He just hadn't admitted it yet. Orion remembered the night he'd given the order. He sat in his private chambers now, staring at the cold hearth, the memory sharp as broken glass. The council chamber. The elders arrayed before him like judges. The prophecy scroll laid flat on the table, its words burning into his mind. Children born of the Alpha King's blood outside the bonded line will bring war to the Pax. They must be removed, Elder Corvus had said. For the good of the kingdom. Orion had been king for less than a season. His father's death had been sudden, violent, a challenge from a rival pack that left the throne empty and the kingdom teetering on the edge of civil war. Orion had won his crown through blood and strategy, but his grip on it was still fragile. The pups had been born to a woman from the outer villages. A brief connection before his coronation, before he understood what his life would become. She had died in childbirth, leaving him with 5 children he could not acknowledge without destroying everything he'd fought to build. Send them away, he had said, his voice hollow. Find them homes. Somewhere far from here. He had believed they would be cared for. Protected. Safe. He had been a fool. The door to his chambers opened without warning. Thane, his second-in-command, stepped inside. My lord, the Eastern Patrol reports. Thane stopped, reading Orion's expression. What's wrong? Nothing. You're a terrible liar when you're distracted. Thane closed the door behind him. What is it? Orion debated silence. But Thane had stood beside him through every battle, every impossible decision. If there was anyone he could trust with fragments of truth, it was this man. The rejected pups at the forest border, Orion said carefully. Someone's been feeding them. I've heard the rumors. The patrols want permission to investigate. Deny them. Thane's eyebrows rose. My lord. The pups aren't harming anyone. Leave them be. The law. I know what the law says. Orion's voice sharpened. I wrote half of them, but I'm telling you to pull the patrols back from that sector. Thane studied him with the particular intensity of someone who'd known him too long to be fooled. This isn't about the pups, is it? Orion said nothing. It's about whoever's helping them. Thane leaned against the desk. Who is she? A village woman. No one important. Then why do you care? Because she kneels in the dirt to bandage children who mean nothing to her. Because she risks everything for kindness no one will ever reward. Because she looks at my failures and sees something worth saving. I don't, Orion lied. Thane smiled faintly. Right. And that's why you've been disappearing every night for the past month. Hunting, you said. I have been hunting. For what? Answers? Penance? Thane's expression sobered. Orion, if this woman is breaking pack law, the council will demand action. You can't protect her forever. I can protect her long enough. For what? Orion didn't answer because he didn't know. Long enough for the pups to grow strong? Long enough for the political situation to shift? Long enough to find a way to claim his children without fracturing the kingdom? Or just long enough to watch her a little while longer, this woman who'd somehow become the only honest thing in his carefully constructed world? Just pull the patrols, Orion said finally. Thane nodded slowly. As you command. But Orion, be careful. Lord Brenwick's been asking questions about the forest border. If he finds out you're involved, let him ask. When Thane left, Orion returned to the window, staring out at the dark forest beyond the keep's walls. Somewhere out there, Lyra was probably preparing tomorrow's offerings. Wrapping bread in cloth. Gathering what little she could spare. She had no idea the king himself was rearranging patrol routes to keep her safe. No idea that every night she walked that forest path, he walked it too, just out of sight, making sure no patrol stumbled upon her secret. No idea that he was falling. Not in the dramatic way the old songs described, no thunderbolt recognition, no mate bond snapping into place. This was slower. Quieter. A steady erosion of every wall he'd built around himself. She made him want to be the man he'd pretended to be when he took the crown. The man who protected the weak instead of abandoning them. The man who chose right over easy. Orion closed his eyes, remembering the way his children had bowed to her. The trust in their eyes. The hope. They had given her the loyalty he'd surrendered his right to claim. And somehow, watching her earn what he'd lost, Orion didn't feel jealous. He felt grateful. Because if he couldn't be there for them, at least someone was. Someone good. Someone who saw worth in what the world had discarded. Someone who made him believe that maybe, just maybe, some mistakes could still be mended. Even if it cost him everything. Lord Brenwick Ashclaw did not believe in coincidence. He stood in the council chamber, studying the patrol maps spread across the table. 3 weeks of reports. 3 weeks of the eastern border patrols being mysteriously redirected. Always away from the same stretch of forest. "Explain this to me," Brenwick said, his voice cold and measured. Captain Derrick shifted uncomfortably. "My lord, the orders came from the Alpha King himself. He said the eastern sector was clear and patrols were needed elsewhere." "And you didn't question this?" "Question the Alpha King?" Derrick's eyes widened. "My lord, never mind." Brenwick waved him away. "Leave the maps." When the captain had gone, Brenwick traced the redirected routes with one clawed finger. The pattern was obvious once you knew to look for it. Every patrol that should have passed through the forest edge had been pulled back. Reassigned. Sent anywhere but there. Someone was being protected. Brenwick had served 3 generations of kings. He understood power, strategy, and the necessity of harsh laws. The pack had survived centuries of war because it culled weakness before it could spread. Rejected pups were a mercy. Better a quick exile than a slow death dragging down the strong. But lately, rumors had reached him. Whispers of food left at the forest border. Of small shapes moving through the trees at night. Of someone foolish enough to aid what should have been forgotten. And now the Alpha King was running interference. Why? Brenwick gathered the maps and made his way through the keep's stone corridors. He found Orion in the training yard, working through sword forms with focused intensity. Even in practice, the king moved like violence barely contained. "My lord," Brenwick called. "A word." Orion lowered his blade, sweat gleaming on his brow. "Lord Ashclaw, what is it?" "The eastern patrols. Why have they been pulled back?" "The sector is stable. Resources are better used elsewhere." "With respect, my lord, that area borders rejected pup territory. It requires regular monitoring." Orion's expression didn't change. "I've deemed it unnecessary." "I disagree." The 2 men stared at each other across the training yard. Around them, warriors slowed their sparring, sensing the tension. "Your disagreement is noted," Orion said quietly. "But the order stands. And if someone is breaking pack law in that sector? Feeding rejected pups? Breeding weakness? Then I trust my scouts will report it through proper channels." Brenwick's jaw tightened. "Of course, my lord. Forgive my concern." He bowed and withdrew, but the seeds of suspicion had taken root. Orion was hiding something. And whatever it was worth protecting at the cost of pack law. That made it dangerous. Brenwick returned to his chambers and summoned 2 of his most trusted guards. Men who answered to him first, the throne second. "I want the forest border watched," he said. Discreetly. "Someone's been helping rejected pups, and I want to know who." "And if we find them, my lord?" "Follow them. Learn everything. But take no action without my word." Brenwick's eyes hardened. If the Alpha King is involved, I need proof before I make accusations. 3 nights later, his men brought him exactly what he needed. A woman, my lord. From the outer village. She's been bringing food to the forest every night for months. Her name. Lyra Fenwick. Lowborn. No family. Works as a seamstress. Brenwick leaned back in his chair. No family. No protection. No one who would miss her if she disappeared. There's more, my lord. She's been treating the pups' wounds. Teaching them. They call her Lightbringer. The title made Brenwick's blood run cold. Lightbringer. A term of reverence. Of authority. This woman wasn't just feeding rejected pups. She was organizing them. Leading them. Creating a pack within the pack. How many pups? He demanded. 5 that we've seen. But there could be more. 5. The same number that had been cast out 7 years ago under the prophecy. The same number the council had ordered removed from packlands. The same number the Alpha King had personally condemned. Understanding crashed over Brenwick like ice water. Those weren't random, rejected pups. They were the king's bastards. The children of prophecy who would bring war to the packs. And somehow, this woman had found them, sheltered them, and turned them into something organized. Something that could threaten everything. And Orion knew. The Alpha King was protecting his own blood over pack law. Over the prophecy. Over the very stability of the kingdom. It was treason of the highest order. Brenwick stood slowly, his mind already calculating the next moves. He couldn't confront Orion directly, not without the full council behind him. Not without proof that would be impossible to deny. But he could remove the woman. And once she was gone, the pups would scatter or starve. The problem would solve itself. Orion would have no choice but to let them go again, or risk exposing his betrayal to the entire pack. Bring her to me, Brenwick said quietly. Tomorrow night, when she walks the forest path. Quietly. No witnesses. And the pups, my lord? Leave them for now. Once their Lightbringer is gone, they'll be harmless. His guards bowed and left to prepare. Brenwick poured himself a measure of wine and stood at the window, watching the dark forest beyond the keep. He told himself he was doing this for the pack. For the law. For the stability that kept them all alive. But deep down, in a place he rarely acknowledged, he knew the truth. He had never forgiven Orion for being chosen over his own bloodline. And now, finally, the perfect king had made a mistake worth exploiting. Lyra knew something was wrong the moment she entered the forest. The air felt different. Too still. Even the wind had gone quiet, as though the trees themselves were holding their breath. She clutched her bundle tighter and kept walking. The pups needed her. Whatever unease prickled at the back of her neck could wait. She had just reached the clearing when she heard the footsteps behind her. Not one set. Many. Lyra spun, her heart hammering, and found herself surrounded by 6 guards in the Alpha King's colors. Their faces were cold, expressions carved from stone. Lyra Fenwick, the leader said. You're under arrest for violating pack law. Her bundle slipped from nerveless fingers. I don't. Feeding rejected pups is treason. You'll come with us. Before she could run, before she could scream, rough hands seized her arms. They dragged her backward, away from the clearing, away from the stone where she'd left so many offerings. Wait, the children, they'll starve. The pups will be dealt with, the guard said flatly. Terror flooded through her. No, please. They're just children. They haven't done anything wrong. Neither have you, by your own measure. A new voice cut through the darkness. Lord Brenwick stepped into view, his smile sharp as a blade. You were simply showing mercy. How noble. Lyra's blood turned to ice. She knew that name. Everyone did. Lord Brenwick enforced the pack's harshest laws with zealot precision. The children are innocent, she said desperately. If you want to punish someone, punish me. Just let them. Oh, I intend to punish you, Miss Fenwick. But first, you're going to tell me exactly how many pups you've been harboring. And who else knows about them. No one. I swear. We'll see. He nodded to the guards. They began hauling her toward the road. That's when the forest exploded. 5 shapes burst from the trees, small, fast, utterly fearless. Kale led them, his face twisted in fury. The twins flanked him. Mira moved like smoke. The smallest girl, despite her size, launched herself at a guard's knee with desperate strength. Let her go. Kale shouted. The guards drew their weapons. No. Lyra screamed. Run. Please, just run. But they didn't run. They fought with everything they had, teeth, claws, rocks, pure defiance. A guard struck Kale across the face, sending him sprawling. Another grabbed Mira by her hair. Brenwick watched with cold satisfaction. Proof of organization. Of leadership. Even better than I hoped. Their children. Lyra thrashed against her captors. Stop it. You're hurting them. They're abominations, Brenwick corrected. And now I have all the evidence I need. Then a voice cut through the chaos like a blade through silk. Release them. Now. Everyone froze. Orion Nightvale stepped into the clearing, and the temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. He wore no crown, no formal regalia. But power radiated from him like heat from a forge. The guards immediately released Lyra and dropped to one knee. Even Brenwick stiffened. My lord, Brenwick said carefully. We were enforcing pack law. I said release them. Brenwick's eyes narrowed. With respect, this woman is guilty of treason. She's been aiding rejected pups for months. The law demands. I know what the law demands. Orion's voice was quieter now. More dangerous. I also know you were ordered to stay away from this sector. Because you wanted to protect her. Brenwick's mask slipped, showing the anger beneath. The question is why, my lord? Why would the Alpha King himself shield a common criminal? Orion's gaze swept over the scene. Lyra, disheveled and terrified. The pups, bleeding but unbowed. Kale, standing protectively in front of the others despite the blood running from his split lip. His children. All of them staring at him now, waiting to see what he would do. The moment had come. The choice he'd known was inevitable from the first night he'd watched Lyra feed them in secret. Orion could lie. Could claim he was merely investigating. Could let Brenwick take them all and preserve the fragile peace he'd built. Or he could tell the truth. And burn it all down. He looked at Lyra. At the woman who'd given his children everything he'd denied them. Kindness. Safety. Hope. She met his eyes, and he saw no recognition there. No understanding of who he was or what he'd done. Just fear for the pups. Not for herself. For them. That decided it. Orion walked forward and knelt in the dirt beside the smallest girl. She flinched, but didn't run. He reached out slowly and touched the wound on her shoulder where Lyra had bandaged it nights ago. I know you, he said softly. The child's eyes went wide. Orion looked up at Brenwick. You want to know why I protect them? Because they're mine. Silence crashed over the clearing. These pups, Orion's voice carried now, pitched for every guard to hear, are my children. Born before I took the throne. Cast out because the council feared the prophecy. And this woman, he stood positioning himself between Lyra and Brenwick, has shown them more honor than their own father did. Lyra's breath hitched. You're the Alpha King? Orion didn't look at her. Couldn't bear to see the betrayal that would be written there. Yes. Brenwick's face had gone pale, then flushed with triumph. You admit it. You've betrayed pack law. Protected abominations. The council will demand. The council will demand nothing. Orion's eyes blazed gold. I am the law. And I claim these children as my blood and my responsibility. He knelt again, this time in front of all 5 pups. I failed you once, he said quietly. I won't fail you again. One by one, his children pressed their foreheads to his shoulders. And the Alpha King, who had conquered kingdoms, finally came home. The council chamber had never felt so much like a tomb. Orion stood at the center of the ancient stone hall, his children arranged behind him. He had insisted they be present. If the council wanted to condemn them, they would look them in the eyes while doing it. Lyra stood apart, flanked by guards. She hadn't spoken to him since the forest. Hadn't looked at him. He didn't blame her. Around the circular chamber, 12 pack lords sat in judgment. Brenwick among them, his expression carved from satisfaction and righteousness. Elder Corvus rose first, his ancient voice carrying through the hall. Orion Nightvale. You stand accused of violating the most sacred laws of our people. You concealed the existence of prophesied children. You protected them in defiance of council decree. You conspired to undermine pack authority. I protected my children, Orion said simply. Children who were legally exiled, Brenwick cut in. Children whose very existence threatens the stability of our kingdom. The prophecy was clear. The prophecy said they would bring war, Orion interrupted. It never said what kind. Or to whom. Semantic games, Brenwick spat. You knew the law. You agreed to their removal. You swore an oath to uphold pack tradition above all else. I was wrong. The chamber fell silent. Orion met each lord's gaze in turn. I was newly crowned. Desperate to prove my strength. So I sacrificed my own blood to appear decisive. I told myself they would be cared for. That exile was mercy. His voice hardened. I was a coward. And I was wrong. This changes nothing, Elder Corvus said. The law exists for a reason. We cannot allow sentiment to override centuries of tradition. The pups must be exiled again. Permanently this time. And you, my lord. He paused. You must choose between your crown and your children. Kale stepped forward before Orion could respond. No. Every eye turned to the boy. You don't get to exile us again, Kale said, his young voice steady as stone. We're not going anywhere. And if you try to make us, you'll have to kill us first. The twins moved to flank him. Mira stepped forward, silent but defiant. Even the smallest girl lifted her chin, amber eyes blazing. You would defy the council? Lord Harwick demanded. We would survive, Kale said. Like we've been doing. While you lived in your warm holes, we learned to hunt. To hide. To protect each other. You think you can break us? He smiled, sharp and cold. You already tried. Brenwick shot to his feet. This is exactly what the prophecy warned against. Defiance. Chaos. These children will tear the pack apart. The pack is already torn apart. Everyone turned to Lyra. She stood straighter now, no longer cowering between the guards. Her voice shook, but her words cut clean. You call yourselves strong. You speak of tradition and law. But all I see are men so afraid of children that you'd rather abandon them than face your own failures. You have no voice here, Brenwick snarled. She has more right to speak than you do, Orion said quietly. She's done more for these pups than any of us. Lyra's eyes finally met his. He saw anger there. Hurt. But also something else. Understanding, perhaps. Or the beginning of it. I didn't know who you were, she said. In the forest. All those nights you watched. You were their father, and you did nothing. The accusation landed like a blade between his ribs. You're right, Orion said. I watched you give them everything I should have. Food. Medicine. Hope. You risked your life for children who meant nothing to you. He turned back to the council. She showed more courage in one night than I've shown in 7 years. Touching, Brenwick said coldly. But irrelevant. The law demands. Exile or execution, Orion finished. Yes. I know. He drew his sword and laid it on the floor at his feet. Then let the law be satisfied. Take my crown. Exile me with them. But they stay together. As a family. The chamber erupted. My lord, you cannot. This is madness. The kingdom needs. The kingdom needs a king who keeps his oaths, Orion said, his voice cutting through the chaos. I swore to protect my people. All of them. Even the ones you wanted me to forget. He looked at his children. Especially them. Elder Corvus raised his hand for silence. If you abdicate, civil war will follow. The rival packs will see weakness. They will strike. Then we fight. You would risk everything for 5 rejected pups? I would risk everything, Orion said quietly, for my children. Kale moved to stand beside him. Then the others followed, arranging themselves in a line. United. Unbreakable. And slowly, impossibly, Lyra stepped forward too. She positioned herself in front of the children, facing the council directly. If you exile them, you exile me as well. I won't abandon them now. You have no claim to these pups, Brenwick said. Neither did you, she shot back. But I fed them anyway. I bound their wounds. I taught them to hope again. She looked at Orion. Someone had to. The rebuke stung. But Orion accepted it. Deserved it. Lord Harwick leaned forward. This is unprecedented. A king cannot simply claim bastard children. Then change the law, Orion said. Impossible. Why? Orion's voice rose now, filling the chamber. Who made these laws? Men. Who enforces them? Us. And who suffers under them? Children who never chose to be born. If our traditions demand we abandon the helpless, then our traditions are worthless. You speak of tearing down everything we've built, Elder Corvus said. I speak of building something better. For a long moment, no one moved. The council lords looked at each other, weighing possibilities, calculating risks. Finally, Lord Thane, Orion's second, stood. I support the king's claim. Let the children be legitimized. That sets a dangerous precedent, Brenwick warned. Good, Thane said. Perhaps it's time we were dangerous to our own cruelty instead of our children. One by one, other lords rose. Not all. But enough. Elder Corvus watched the tide turn with ancient, tired eyes. The council is divided. This matter cannot be resolved tonight. He looked at Orion. But know this, if you claim these children, you claim responsibility for the prophecy. If war comes, it falls on your shoulders. I accept that burden. Then we adjourn. For now. Corvus struck his staff against stone. But Lord Ashclaw is right about one thing. This is not over. As the lords filed out, Brenwick caught Orion's arm. You've made a powerful enemy today. I've had powerful enemies before. Not like me. Brenwick's smile was ice. I will see you fall. You're welcome to try. When they were alone, Orion turned to find his children and Lyra watching him. What happens now? Kale asked. Orion knelt before them all. Now we fight for a world that deserves you. And Lyra, despite everything, despite the betrayal and the lies and the 7 years of silence, knelt too. Together, she said quietly. Orion met her eyes. Saw the pain there. The anger. But also the smallest spark of hope. It would have to be enough. Orion had faced armies. Conquered territories. Stared down challengers who wanted his crown and his life. None of it had prepared him for this. He stood on the great balcony of the keep, looking down at the assembled packs. Hundreds of wolves in human form, gathered in the courtyard below. Word had spread through the kingdom like wildfire. The Alpha King would make a decree. Behind him, his children waited. Lyra stood with them, one protective hand on the smallest girl's shoulder. Thane appeared at his elbow. You don't have to do this publicly. A written decree would suffice. No, Orion said. If I hide them now, I teach them shame. They deserve better. Brenwick has been gathering supporters all morning. Half the lesser lords are with him. Let them come. Thane studied him for a long moment. You've changed. No, Orion said quietly. I'm finally becoming what I should have been. He stepped forward, and the crowd fell silent. 7 years ago, Orion's voice carried across the courtyard, I made a choice. The council warned me of a prophecy. that children born of my blood outside the bonded line would bring war to the packs. I was newly crowned. Afraid. So I agreed to send them away. He paused, letting the words settle. I told myself it was for the good of the kingdom. That exile was mercy. I was wrong. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Orion raised his hand for silence. These 5 children survived what should have killed them. They endured cold, hunger, and rejection. And when the world turned its back, one woman, a seamstress with no rank, no power, no reason to care, fed them anyway. He turned, gesturing to Lyra. She stiffened as hundreds of eyes fixed on her. Lyra Fenwick risked everything to show kindness where our laws demanded cruelty. She gave my children what I denied them. Orion's voice hardened. She is the bravest person in this kingdom, and I will not allow her to be punished for my failures. The law is clear. Brenwick's voice rang out. He stood at the front of the crowd, surrounded by his supporters. Aiding rejected pups is treason. Then the law is unjust, Orion said simply. The crowd erupted. Shouts of agreement and protest tangled together. Brenwick pushed forward. You cannot simply discard tradition because it inconveniences you. The prophecy said my children would bring war. Orion descended the stairs, moving toward Brenwick. It never said they would start it. He stopped 3 paces away, close enough that only those nearby could hear his next words. You've wanted my crown since my father chose me over you, Orion said quietly. This isn't about prophecy or law. It's about power you think should have been yours. Brenwick's face flushed crimson. How dare challenge me? Orion's voice dropped to a deadly whisper. You want war? Start it honestly. Right here. Right now. For a moment, Brenwick looked like he might accept. His hand moved toward his blade. Then he saw Orion's eyes, gold and utterly calm, and understood. This was not a king afraid of losing his throne. This was a father protecting his children. And there was nothing more dangerous. Brenwick stepped back. The council will hear of this. The council has already heard. Orion turned back to address the crowd. I claim these children as my own blood, as heirs to my line, and I place Lyra Fenwick under my protection as their guardian and caretaker. Guardian. Lyra's voice was small behind him. I'm not. You've been their mother in everything but name, Orion said, not looking back. He couldn't. Not yet. If you'll accept it. Silence stretched. Then Kale stepped forward. We accept. The other children followed, arranging themselves around Lyra in a clear statement of loyalty. Orion finally turned. Lyra's eyes were wide, uncertain. But she didn't pull away when the smallest girl took her hand. I don't understand, Lyra said. You're the Alpha King. You could claim anyone. Why me? Because they chose you first, Orion said simply. And they were right to. Brenwick's voice cut through the moment. This is madness. You elevate a commoner? Legitimize bastards? You'll tear the kingdom apart. No. Orion faced him fully now. I'm building something stronger than fear and cruelty. If you can't accept that, then leave. But if you raise arms against my children, you raise them against me. Then you've declared war on your own pack. I've declared war on injustice. Orion's voice carried across the entire courtyard now. Any wolf who stands with me, stand now. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then Thane stepped forward. I stand with the king. Another lord followed. Then another. Not all of them. Not even most. But enough. Slowly, wolves throughout the crowd began to move forward. Common pack members. Guards. Families who'd lost children to the old laws and found hope in these words. Brenwick watched his support crumble, rage twisting his features. You're a fool, Orion. The prophecy will come true. These children will destroy everything. Perhaps, Orion said. Or perhaps they'll build something better than what we deserve. He climbed the stairs back to his children. To Lyra. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, he said quietly, speaking only to her now. I abandoned them when they needed me most. I watched you risk everything while I hid in shadows. I was a coward. Yes, Lyra said. No softening. No easy grace. You were. I can't undo that. But I can promise you this, I will spend the rest of my life proving I've changed. That I'm worthy of the trust you've shown them. Lyra looked at the children gathered around her. At Cale, who stood tall despite his crooked arm. At Mira, who'd finally started smiling. At the smallest girl, who no longer flinched at every sound. They forgive you, she said finally. Whether I do, that will take time. I understand. But I'll stay. For them. She met his eyes. Not for you. It hurt. But it was honest. And Orion had lived with enough lies. That's enough, he said. Below, Brenwick gathered his supporters and left the courtyard. Orion watched them go, knowing this was far from over. But for the first time in 7 years, his children stood in sunlight instead of shadow. And the woman who'd saved them stood beside them, fierce and unafraid. War might come. The prophecy might still unfold. But today, the Alpha King had chosen love over fear. And he would burn the world down before he let anyone take that away again. The attack came 3 nights later. Orion woke to the sound of steel on stone and knew immediately what was happening. He was dressed and armed before the warning bells finished their first toll. Brenwick had made his move. Stay with the children, Orion commanded Thane as he ran through the corridors. No matter what happens, keep them safe. They're already gone. Orion's blood turned to ice. What? Someone breached the east wing. Lyra and the pups were taken during the shift change. Thane's face was grim. It was coordinated. Professional. Brenwick. His men left a message. Thane held out a blood-stained cloth. Come to the old stone circle. Alone. Or the woman and the abominations die. Orion took the cloth, his hands utterly steady despite the rage building in his chest. How many went with him? 40, maybe 50. Lords who still believe in the old ways. Not enough for a war. But enough for an execution. Orion headed for the armory. Gather our wolves. Every fighter we have. He said alone. He can say whatever he wants. Orion's eyes blazed gold. He took my children. I'm taking his head. The old stone circle sat on the border of Packlands, an ancient place where challenges had been settled for generations. When Orion arrived with his forces, he found Brenwick waiting with his rebels. And in the center, bound and kneeling, were Lyra and the 5 children. Orion's wolf surged against his skin, demanding blood. He forced it down through sheer will. Let them go, Brenwick. Not until you abdicate. Brenwick stood behind Lyra, a blade pressed to her throat. Step down. Leave the kingdom. Take your bastards and this woman far from here. Do that, and I let them live. And if I refuse? Then I start with her. The blade pressed harder. A thin line of blood appeared on Lyra's neck. She didn't flinch. Didn't beg. Just met Orion's eyes with fierce determination. Don't, she said quietly. Don't give him what he wants. Brave words from a dead woman, Brenwick sneered. Cale struggled against his bonds. Touch her and I'll kill you myself. You. Brenwick laughed. A crippled boy playing at threats? He's not playing. Orion's voice was soft. Deadly. And neither am I. I'm going to give you one chance, Brenwick. Release them. Leave Packlands. Spend the rest of your life somewhere I never have to see your face again. Or what? You'll kill me. Brenwick's smile widened. You came alone, just like I demanded. Look around, Orion. You're outnumbered. Outmatched. The prophecy was right. Your children will bring war. But not the way you thought. You're wrong about one thing. Orion smiled. I didn't come alone. Wolves emerged from the forest on all sides. Not just warriors, common pack members, families, even some of the lords who'd stayed silent during the council meeting. Hundreds of them. I came with everyone who's tired of your cruelty, Orion said. Everyone who's lost children to the old laws. Everyone who wants to build something better. Brenwick's confidence wavered. This is treason. No. Orion drew his blade. This is justice. You'd risk civil war for 5 unwanted pups? I'd risk everything for family. Orion stepped forward. Now. Last chance. Release them. Brenwick's hand trembled on the knife. His wolves looked at each other, seeing their doom written in the numbers surrounding them. Then Lyra moved. She drove her head backward, slamming into Brenwick's face. The blade slipped from her throat. In the same motion, she rolled away, putting herself between the children and their captor. Brenwick roared, blood streaming from his broken nose. He raised his blade to strike. And Orion was there. The fight was brutal and short. Brenwick was skilled, vicious, fighting with the desperation of a man who knew he'd already lost. But Orion fought with something stronger than desperation. He fought with purpose. Every strike was for a child left in the cold. Every parry was for years of silence. Every movement brought him closer to the future he should have fought for from the beginning. When Brenwick's blade shattered against Orion's, the rebel lord fell to his knees. Do it, Brenwick spat. Make me a martyr. Prove you're the tyrant I always said you were. Orion lowered his blade. No. You're not worth the blood. You wanted the old ways. He gestured to the assembled packs. Let them decide your fate. He turned to his people. Brenwick Ashclaw stands accused of kidnapping, treason, and attempted murder. What say you? The verdict came in a single, unified voice: exile. Brenwick's face went white. Exile was a fate worse than death for a pack lord. No territory. No authority. No home. Strip him of rank, Orion commanded. Escort him to the border. If he ever sets foot on pack lands again, he dies. Guards moved forward. Brenwick's rebels surrendered without a fight, seeing which way the wind had turned. As they dragged Brenwick away, he met Orion's eyes one last time. The prophecy isn't finished. Your children will still bring war. Then we'll face it together, Orion said. As a family. When the clearing emptied, Orion ran to where Lyra still knelt with the children, shielding them with her own body even though the danger had passed. He dropped to his knees beside them, checking each child for injuries. Are you hurt? We're fine, Kale said. Lyra kept them away from us. Orion looked at her. At the blood on her throat. At the fierce protectiveness still burning in her eyes. You could have died. So could they, she said simply. That wasn't acceptable. Something shifted in his chest. Not the mate bond the old stories spoke of, something quieter, deeper. The recognition that this woman, who owed him nothing, had risked everything for his children. Again. Thank you, he said quietly. Lyra studied him for a long moment. Then, slowly, she reached out and touched his hand. You came for us. Always. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was a beginning. Thane approached, reading the moment. The packs are gathering at the keep. They want to hear from you. Both of you. Orion looked at Lyra. Will you stand with me? She looked at the children, who nodded eagerly. Looked at the assembled wolves, who had fought for something they believed in. Looked at Orion, who had finally become the man his crown demanded. Yes, she said. For them. But when she took his offered hand, Orion felt the smallest squeeze of her fingers. Maybe, he thought, one day it would be for him too. For now this was enough. They walked back to the keep together. A king, a seamstress, and 5 children who had survived the impossible. The prophecy still hung over them like a storm cloud. But tonight, they had one. And tomorrow, they would build the world their courage had earned. Spring came to the kingdom like a promise kept. Lyra stood in the garden behind the keep, watching the children play. They looked different now, clean, fed, wearing clothes that actually fit. But more than that, they looked happy. Kale was teaching the younger ones to read, his crooked arm no longer a mark of shame but a reminder of survival. The twins laughed as they chased each other through the flower beds. Mira hummed softly, the first sounds anyone had heard from her in years. And the smallest girl, who now answered to Orion, sat weaving flower crowns with careful concentration. 3 months had passed since Brenwick's exile. 3 months of rebuilding. Of new laws being written. Of a kingdom slowly learning to value compassion alongside strength. They've grown, Orion said from behind her. Lyra didn't startle. She'd learned to recognize his footsteps. Children do that when they're not starving. He moved to stand beside her, careful to leave space between them. He always did. Never pushing. Never assuming. The council approved the new succession law, he said. All 5 are officially recognized as heirs. Equal in status. That must have caused an uproar. Several lords threatened to resign. Orion smiled slightly. I told them where to send their letters. Despite herself, Lyra laughed. Over the past months, she'd seen glimpses of the man beneath the crown. His dry humor. His unexpected gentleness with the children. The way he sat up late reviewing petitions from families seeking to reclaim exiled relatives. He was trying. Genuinely, relentlessly trying to be better. There's something else, Orion said, his tone shifting. The council wants to formalize your position. Guardian isn't enough. They're suggesting Lady of the Keep. Officially. Lyra's breath caught. That's a title for family. For the person the children call mother, Orion finished quietly. Which you are in every way that matters. I'm a seamstress from the outer village. You're the woman who saved my children when I couldn't. He finally looked at her. You're the bravest person I know. Your blood doesn't change that. Lyra studied his face, seeing the sincerity there. 3 months ago, she would have refused immediately. Would have run back to her cottage and her simple life. But that life felt like a dream now. These children, these fierce, brilliant children, had become her world. If I accept, she said carefully, it would only be for them. I know. Not for you. Orion's jaw tightened, but he nodded. I understand. Do you? Lyra turned to face him fully. Because I don't think you do. You watch me like you're waiting for forgiveness. Like if you're patient enough, kind enough, I'll forget what you did. I don't expect you to forget. I watched those children starve, Lyra cut in, her voice shaking. I held Orion while she cried from nightmares about being abandoned. I taught Kale to trust again after the world broke his arm and his spirit. You don't get to earn that back in 3 months. You're right. Orion's voice was rough. You're absolutely right. I failed them. I failed you. And nothing I do will ever change that. Then why do you keep trying? Because I love them. The words came out raw, unguarded. And because watching you with them showed me what I should have been. What I could still become. If you let me. Lyra's anger cracked, just slightly. I'm afraid. Of what? That you'll leave again. That when the next crisis comes, the next impossible choice, you'll choose the crown over them. Over, she stopped. Over you. Orion asked softly. She didn't answer. He took a careful step closer. Lyra, I know I don't deserve this. But I need you to understand something. The crown, the kingdom, all of it. I'd burn it down tomorrow if it meant keeping them safe. Keeping you safe. Pretty words. Then let me prove it. He held out his hand. Stay. Not as their guardian. Not as a political necessity. Stay because you want to. And I'll spend every day showing you that I mean what I say. And if I never love you back? The question hung between them like a blade. Orion smiled, sad and genuine. Then I'll still be grateful you're here. That they have you. That's enough. Lyra looked at his offered hand. At the children playing in the garden. At the life she'd accidentally built from kindness and stubbornness. She thought about the scared girl who'd snuck into the forest with bread wrapped in cloth. The woman who'd defied pack law because it was wrong. The person she'd become through loving these impossible children. "I can't promise I'll ever feel what you want me to feel," she said. "I'm not asking for promises." "Good." She took his hand. "Because I'm terrible at keeping them." His fingers closed around hers, warm and careful. "So you'll stay?" "I'll stay. For them." She paused. "And maybe eventually, we'll see about the rest." It wasn't a declaration of love. Wasn't the fairy tale ending the old songs promised. But it was honest. And it was hers. Orion looked up from her flower crowns and squealed. "Look. They're holding hands." The other children stopped playing, turning to stare with matching expressions of delight. "About time," Kale muttered, but he was grinning. Lyra felt her face heat. "It's not, we're just." But Orion was laughing, and the sound was so unexpected, so genuine, that she couldn't help but smile too. The children ran over, wrapping themselves around both of them in a chaotic embrace. Orion placed a flower crown on Lyra's head. Mira tucked one onto Orion's. Kale rolled his eyes but didn't pull away when the youngest twin hugged his waist. Standing there, surrounded by children who'd survived the impossible and chosen love anyway, Lyra felt something shift in her chest. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But hope. And perhaps in time, that would be enough. Later that evening, as the sun set over the kingdom, Orion signed the new laws into effect. No child would be cast out for weakness. No pup would be abandoned for failing to meet impossible standards. And kindness, once forbidden, would be honored as the strength it truly was. The prophecy still lingered, war might yet come. But when it did, they would face it together. A king who'd learned to kneel. A woman who'd taught him how. And 5 children who'd shown them both what family really meant. Not blood alone. Not destiny. But choice, freely given, day after day. She had fed the pack's forgotten pups, never knowing their father was the Alpha King. And in saving them, she'd saved him too. If Lyra and Orion's story stayed with you, please like this video, subscribe for more complete werewolf romance tales, and share it with someone who loves Alpha King stories. Thank you for listening, and until the next story, may the moon guide your path.